Imagine holding a small 5-cent coin in your hand, a simple piece of metal that most people pass by without a second thought. Yet this very coin carries the weight of American history, political change, economic struggle, and the birth of one of the most iconic designs in U.S. coinage history today. We are stepping back to the year 1939, a turning point year in the story of the Jefferson nickel, a year that quietly produced some of the most fascinating and potentially valuable nickels ever. Struck by the United States Mint, this is not just the story of a coin. This is the story of America on the edge of a new era, the story of Thomas Jefferson reborn in metal, and the story of collectors who, decades later, would realize that what seemed ordinary was anything but ordinary. The 1939 Jefferson nickel was struck at a moment when the nation was still recovering from the Great Depression, while the clouds of World War II were beginning to gather overseas, and this coin reflects that tension between hope and uncertainty, because by 1939, the Jefferson nickel design itself was still young, having replaced the Buffalo nickel only the year before, and the U.S. Mint was still refining every detail from Jefferson's portrait to the famous image of Monticello, his historic Virginia home. This makes early Jefferson nickels, especially those from 1939, incredibly important because they represent the foundation years of a design that would last for decades and become one of the longest running coin series in American history. The 1939 Jefferson nickel was produced at 3 major mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and each mint left behind its own story, its own rarity, its own surprises, and its own hidden treasures. Today, study these coins not just for their dates, but for their mint marks. Strike quality and rare varieties that can turn a 5-cent coin into a piece worth hundreds, thousands, or in exceptional cases, even more. What makes the 1939 Jefferson nickel truly exciting is that this year introduced one of the most famous and sought-after varieties in the entire nickel series, a variety that has fueled collector dreams for generations and turned pocket change finds into legendary stories. This was also the year when the U.S. Mint experimented with details that would later be changed, making certain 1939 nickels stand apart in ways that only careful eyes can detect. And that is where the magic lies, because the real value of a 1939 Jefferson nickel is often hidden in plain sight in the spacing of letters, the sharpness of steps on Monticello, and tiny differences in design that separate common coins from rare gems. This coin also reflects America's respect for its founding fathers, because Thomas Jefferson was chosen not just for his role as president, but for his influence as a thinker, inventor, architect, and champion of liberty and placing. His image on the nickel was a statement about American values at a time when those values were being tested around the world. As you listen to this story, you will discover how the 1939 Jefferson nickel was made, how many were produced, why some are far rarer than others, and how condition can mean the difference between a coin worth face value and a coin that can change a collector's life. You will learn why full steps matter, why certain mint marks create excitement, and why collectors still search rolls, collections, and old jars, hoping to uncover a 1939 nickel that was overlooked. For decades, this is a journey through minting history, economic reality, artistic design, and the psychology of collecting. Because coins like the 1939 Jefferson nickel remind us that history is not always locked in museums. Sometimes it is sitting quietly in a drawer waiting for someone to recognize its true worth. So settle in, because this deep dive into the valuable 1939 Jefferson nickel is more than a lesson in numismatics. It is a story of American resilience, craftsmanship, and hidden treasure. And by the end of this video, you will never look at a nickel the same way again. We continue deeper into the story of the 1939 Jefferson nickel. We begin to understand why this single year holds such a powerful grip on collectors and historians alike, because 1939 was not just another production year. It was a year where details mattered more than ever, and where small differences created lasting legends within the coin collecting world. The United States Mint was still adjusting to the new Jefferson design introduced in 1938, and Mint engravers were learning how to perfect Jefferson's portrait and the architectural lines of Monticello. This learning process resulted in variations that today define rarity and value, and this is especially true when we talk about strike quality, because early Jefferson nickels are famous for weak strikes, particularly on the steps of Monticello, and that weakness makes sharply struck examples incredibly desirable and extremely difficult To find the steps at the base of Monticello, known as full steps, became one of the most important grading standards for Jefferson nickels and the 1939 issues. Sit at the center of that conversation, because finding a 1939 nickel with clearly defined, uninterrupted steps is a challenge even for advanced collectors, and when such a coin appears, it instantly attracts attention, competition, and strong prices at auction. This challenge is even greater for coins struck at the Denver and San Francisco mints, where striking pressure was often inconsistent, leading to soft details and worn-looking coins straight from the mint, which means that well-struck survivors are rare by nature and highly valued today. Beyond strike quality, the 1939 Jefferson nickel also represents a moment when mintages alone do not tell the full story. Because while millions of nickels were produced that year, survival rates in high grade are much lower due to heavy circulation during the late 1930s and early 1940s. Nickels were workhorse coins used daily for transportation, food, and basic needs, and few people saved them in mint condition, which means that collectors today are competing for a limited number of high-quality examples that escape decades of where this scarcity becomes even more dramatic when we explore the legendary varieties that emerged from the 1939 production, and these varieties are the reason why this year is spoken about with excitement, reverence, and curiosity in coin collecting circles. The most famous among them is a variety that changed the way collectors look at Jefferson nickels forever, a variety that proves how a small design change can create a major numismatic milestone, and this variety transformed the 1939 Jefferson nickel from a historical curiosity into a must-have centerpiece for serious collections. And what makes it even more fascinating is that when these coins were released into circulation, no one noticed anything special about them. They were spent, saved, and circulated just like any other nickel. Only years later did collectors begin to realize that something unique had slipped through the mint unnoticed, and that realization sparked decades of searching, studying, and collecting as new examined thousands of coins looking for that one special detail that separates ordinary from extraordinary. This hunt is a core part of the appeal, because the 1939 Jefferson nickel is not just about ownership, it is about discovery, about the thrill of finding something rare where others saw nothing special, and that thrill continues today as collectors still check Rolls estate collections and inherited jars, hoping that luck and knowledge will intersect in their favor. The historical backdrop of 1939 adds another layer of meaning to this coin, because America was standing at a crossroads, emerging from economic hardship while watching global tensions rise, and this sense of transition is captured in the Jefferson nickel, a modern design, replacing the rugged buffalo nickel symbolizing a shift toward clarity, order, and classical American ideals, and Thomas Jefferson's image reinforced those ideals by representing intellect, diplomacy, and the foundation of democracy. In every 1939 Jefferson nickel carries that symbolism forward, making it more than just a piece of currency. It is a snapshot of American identity at a critical moment in time, and as we move further into this exploration, we will uncover how collectors evaluate these coins today, what separates common examples from elite specimens, how grading services assess condition, and why the market continues to reward top quality 1939 Jefferson nickels with strong demand and rising interest, because this story is far from over, and the deeper we go, the more you will see why the 1939 Jefferson nickel remains one of the most compelling and talked about coins in the entire U.S. nickel series.